Guys, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Let me know. If you're in the comments there, guys, just let me know you can hear me. Be really helpful. Okay, 242 people on so far. This is great. Yeah, Danny seems to be okay. Okay, thanks, guys, for giving me the thumbs up. That's good to know. What we're going to do, we're going to play the press conference. So I want to make sure the audio is right on the live. And also, what we're going to do after the press conference, we're going to give some comments on it. So let's see what this man has to say. Let me know if you can hear him, okay? No, we can't hear him. Why is that? Sorry about this, guys. Technical issues all the time with this stuff. Is anyone getting volume there?
With the families at the heart of this, their pain is unimaginable. And so I call on everyone to give them, and indeed the wider community at Southport, the space to grieve, and time for the authorities in Merseyside to do their job. There will be a time for questions, and we will make sure that the victims and families in Southport are at the heart of that process. That's the very least that we owe these families. But we also owe them justice. So while there's a prosecution that must not be prejudiced, for them to receive the justice that they deserve, the time for answering those questions is not now. And I remind everyone that the price for a trial that is prejudiced is ultimately paid by the victims and their families who are deprived of the justice that they deserve. Let me now turn to the actions of a tiny, mindless minority in our society. Because in the aftermath of this attack, the community of Southport had to suffer twice. A gang of thugs got on trains and buses, went to a community that is not their own, a community grieving the most horrific tragedy, and then proceeded to throw bricks at police officers who just 24 hours earlier had been having to deal with an attack on children in their community. And make no mistake, whether it's in Southport, London, or Hartlepool, these people are showing our country exactly who they are. Mosques targeted because they're mosques. Flares thrown at the statue of Winston Churchill. A Nazi salute at the cenotaph. And so I've just held a meeting with senior police and law enforcement leaders where we've resolved to show who we are. A country that will not allow understandable fear to curdle into division and hate in our communities, and that will not permit, under any circumstances, a breakdown in law and order on our streets. Because let's be very clear about this. It's not protest. It's not legitimate. It's crime, violent disorder, an assault on the rule of law and the execution of justice. And so, on behalf of the British people, who expect their values and their security to be upheld, we will put a stop to it. I want to thank all of the police officers across the country who have already, as they do so often, stood up to intimidation and violence in the past few days and indeed throughout the summer. And let me be clear, the meeting this afternoon was not about pointing the finger of blame. That is not how this government of service conducts its business, because it doesn't work. Rather, this was a meeting to pull together our response both to the immediate challenge, which is clearly driven by far-right hatred, but also all violent disorder that flares up, whatever the apparent cause or motivation. We make no distinction. Crime is crime, and so to that end, I can announce today that following this meeting, we will establish a national capability across police forces to tackle violent disorder. These thugs are mobile, they move from community to community, and we must have a policing response that can do the same. Shared intelligence, wider deployment of facial recognition technology, and preventative action, criminal behaviour orders to restrict their movements before they can even board a train, in just the same way that we do with football hooligans. And let me also say to large social media companies and those who run them, violent disorder clearly whipped up online, that is also a crime. It's happening on your premises, and the law must be upheld everywhere. That is the single most important duty of government. Service rests on security, and we will take all necessary action to keep our streets safe. I'll now take a number of questions from the media. I'm going to start with Alex from BBC.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed. Alex Forsyth, BBC News. Can I ask, how concerned are you that the violence that we've seen may spread? Are you providing extra police resources? Are you preparing any clampdown on the far-right groups that are being blamed for this? And indeed, if you are, how can you, given that they're often very disparate? And if I may, are you satisfied with the way the BBC's handled the Hugh Edwards case? Thank you.
Yeah, well, Alex, in relation to the violence that we've seen, the whole point on pulling together the meeting today was to have a coordinated response. The clear message from police and law enforcement is not that they need more powers. I think we have to wean ourselves off the idea that the only response is to pass more legislation every time we have a challenge in front of us, is to use the existing powers that we've got, pulling together the intelligence, the data, making sure that that is being shared across police forces, and that as these groups sort of bounce from chief constable to chief constable around the country, we have the same response, robust response to them, and that we're clear that this is violent disorder, it's not protest, and that needs to be the starting position of the policing response to it. In relation to Hugh Edwards, look, I'm shocked and appalled, I'm sure, as everybody is in relation to this. The Culture Secretary is meeting the Director General of the BBC later on today. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to try and wean people off the 2 or 3 questions in one, if I may, because otherwise we just won't get through. I've got actually Paul from Channel 4 next.
Thanks, Keir. You mentioned there the national capability across all police forces. We've spoken to your new Labour MP in Hartlepool today, and he says that Cleveland Police was simply overwhelmed. They don't have the number of police officers to deal with what they had to deal with. So will you be fast-tracking the recruitment of more police officers? Will what you're announcing today actually increase the number of police officers on the street?
Well, we've already made a commitment to increasing police numbers. That's a commitment we made into the general election, and particularly police officers to work in neighbourhood policing. And that did come up in the meeting today in terms of the capability that's needed. But look, Paul, to be frank, what happens in the next few weeks matters, and that isn't a question on its own of recruitment, which takes longer. It is a question of coordinating the response, making sure the capability that we've got to share intelligence, share data, have a coordinated response, and to act as quickly as possible in cases so that arrests are followed swiftly by charging. It is an attempt to pull that together so that those that engage in criminal behaviour, which this is, will feel the full force of the law very quickly. And I think that's the most important aspect coming out of this meeting this afternoon. Thank you. I've got Shihab from ITV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Shihab Khan from ITV News. Prime Minister, how do you stop the far right from hijacking issues, especially when so many members of those groups often say they are being influenced by charismatic leaders who are often pushing for the division that you say that you want to tackle? And a second quick question, if I may. British Muslims up and down the country will have seen these riots or demonstrations, whatever you like to call them, unfold. They've seen mosques get attacked. They've watched as shops have been looted. There have been chants which some would say are grossly offensive. Partly this has happened because of misinformation. They now say they feel unsafe. What is your message to the British Muslim community, and what are you willing to do to make sure they feel safe in their own home?
Well, taking both parts of that, I think it is really important to emphasise over and over again the price paid for those that put out misinformation and interfere in the work that the authorities are trying to do in Southport. The price is paid ultimately by the mums and dads who are grieving their children. Because if there isn't a fair trial that gives them the justice they demand, they are the ones that are going to suffer the most. And so nobody should pretend that they are speaking for those families when they involve themselves in activity like this. Because they are putting what is now the single most important thing for those families, which is to grieve properly and to have the justice to which they are entitled. And that's why this is so important. In relation to the Muslim community, look, let me be very clear. I will take every step that's necessary to keep you safe. And that's why I said what I said about mosques being attacked because they're mosques. The far right is showing who they are. We have to show who we are in response to that. And that's why we pulled together this response this afternoon to try and coordinate and make sure that as we face the next few days and weeks, we have the strongest possible response in order to ensure that there is safety for all of our citizens, including those Muslims who will see, as you rightly say, attacks on their mosques because they're mosques. Thank you. I've got John from Sky.
Thank you. John Craig from Sky News. You've talked about better coordination. Clearly, that's one of the purposes of this meeting. How concerned are you about perhaps apparent inconsistencies of approach by police forces? For example, 4 arrests in Southport, over 100 here, different groups being treated differently, whether it's far left, far right, as some have suggested. Resources you've mentioned, smaller forces not being able to cope. We saw, didn't we, in Southport that Merseyside had to call in help from other forces. You've said no to extra police powers, but what about banning some of these far right groups, as Angela Rayner has suggested?
Well, look, in relation to the inconsistency, I don't think you can simply measure the number of arrests and say there's an inconsistency, because that will depend event by event. But look, yes, this afternoon was an attempt and an agreement actually to pull together a national response so that that consistency, that support is there, and the sharing of intelligence and data. That's not a criticism of any of the forces that are trying to deal with difficult situations as they arise on their patch, but it is to give them the support that they need more quickly so that they can react more robustly. In relation to preventative measures, one of the issues that came up this morning was, this afternoon, I'm sorry, is criminal behaviour orders, which can be attached to convictions for these sorts of offences, which then give the police and the authorities the ability to put their arms around and have a tighter grip of those that have already shown their true colours and been convicted. And I would personally like to see more use of those orders in the same way that they're used in football hooligan cases to stop people travelling, identify and prevent their patterns of behaviour, because these are not people who are going to protest. You don't go to protest with a rock in your hand. You go to commit violent disorder, and we need to be really clear about that. And I think those orders would help us in the preventative space. Thank you very much. I've got Jason from the Mail.
Thanks, PM. Do you welcome the decision to name the suspect in this case, apparently taken to end some of the disinformation? And this is a pretty unusual summit for August. People are going on holiday now. Are you worried about we could be facing a sort of summer of riots?
Well, firstly, on the naming of the individual, that's a matter, obviously, for the court. A decision's been taken today, so that is now in the public domain. I won't say more about that because the purpose of the rules in relation to the information that's available is to ensure there can be a fair trial, and my starting point on that is very much the victims and their families, because and I have seen this in other cases, the price for a trial that goes wrong is paid by the family and friends and victims of crime. In this case, I can't imagine the added pain that would be piled on in this case if there was anything that got in the way of the trial of this particular issue. Look, in relation to what happens over the next few weeks and months, it is obvious to me, and I think obvious to anybody looking in, that so far as the far right is concerned, this is coordinated. This is deliberate. This is not a protest that has got out of hand. It is a group of individuals who are absolutely bent on violence. And that's why it's important, I think, to pull together the senior police and law enforcement leaders, as we did today, to ensure that that is met with the most robust response in the coming days and weeks. I've got Aubrey from the Times.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said that violent disorder is being whipped up online. What are you going to do to combat that spread of disinformation? Are you going to haul in social media companies? Could you restart the rapid rebuttal unit in Whitehall? And what is your message to Nigel Farage, who obviously asked this week whether the truth is being withheld? Do you think that was responsible for anything?
In relation to the platform providers, some of it isn't as complicated as it may at first seem. So inciting violence online is a criminal offence. And that is not a matter of free speech. It is a criminal offence. Clearly, in relation to platform providers, there's a balance to be struck. Social media platform providers, it's an amazing opportunity that we all enjoy as a country, that is very important to us, that these platforms are there to be used for the great opportunities that they provide. There is also a responsibility that goes with it. That's a space for a mature conversation to take place. In relation to the comments of others, look, I'm not going to stand here and cast judgment on what others are saying. I know what I'm saying, and I know why I'm saying it very, very clearly, which is my focus, whenever I'm confronted with any questions about this, is on the families and victims of those, particularly in Southport, who were so affected by this. I would also add the police officers. I had the privilege of going up the day after this incident to speak to the police officers who had to deal in responding, the first responders to this. Remarkably but unsurprisingly, they were back on duty. I was able to thank them for what they had done, but I'm not going to pretend to you that they weren't affected by what they had to witness, what they'd had to deal with. They said to me, as they always do, I was simply doing my job, and of course they were. But doing your job, there's no way what happened to them or what they had to endure, had to respond to, was anything other than extraordinarily challenging. And I think that if we all start with a clear focus on the victims, their families, and the police officers who had to respond to this horrific attack, that would be a good template or framework for the discussion of all of these matters. I've got Rowena from The Guardian.
Rowena Mason from The Guardian. Nigel Farage is the leader of Reform. He did very well, obviously, in the election, and he's been accused of spreading conspiracy theories about the Southport tragedy and his response to it. Is it enough to say that you just won't comment on what he's said, given that some people, including a former police chief, have linked his comments to the violence that broke out in the riots?
Look, I'm not going to run a sort of running commentary on the motives of other people. What I am saying is my focus is on the families, the victims who are at the heart of this, and I think that that should be the focus for everybody. Anybody who says or does anything that impedes their ability to get the justice that they deserve cannot claim to be acting in their best interests, because they're not. Thank you. And I've got John from the Mirror.
Hello, thank you. What consequences will there be if social media firms do fail to take action?
Well, I think there's a discussion to be had, and it is a balance, and it needs to be the right balance, because social media is a fantastic opportunity, but it also carries responsibility, and that's the mature discussion that we've had. What we've done today is have a discussion with law enforcement and the police, which is about pulling things together for a coordinated response. What has not worked well recently with the previous government, in my view, is the performative politics of a government blaming everybody else and pointing fingers. In that approach to me is not effective. It's the performative politics that I've put an end to with a government of service. My approach is different, which is to roll my sleeves up, get the relevant people around the table and fix the problems and meet the challenges that we have as a country. We did that with law enforcement and the police this afternoon. A similar approach with social media, which is not performative politics, which gets you nowhere, but the politics of service, which is to actually work together to address the challenges that we have and make sure that we keep the country safe and respect the values of our fellow citizens, which are about law enforcement, security and safety. Thank you all very much indeed.
Okay, right guys, I'll just get this camera a little bit more decent. Can everybody see me and hear me there, guys? Yeah, just give me a thumbs up. Just make sure that you guys can see and hear me. Someone's saying shut up there. I'm hoping that's to Keir Starmer and not to me. Okay, we've got 2,455 people in the stream. Just in the comments, let me know what you thought of what Keir Starmer said. I think it is probably one of the most despicable press conferences I've ever seen. And again, I just want to give a bit of context here, guys. So I want us to think about what's happened this week. So let's go back to Saturday. Okay, let's go back to Saturday, because I'm absolutely convinced that these lunatics that are now running the country. I found that I don't know whether you agree with me on this, and again, let me know in the comments. I found that press conference about the most chilling press conference I've ever seen in my life. If you agree with that, just let me know. Just let me know in the comments here, because I think he, on so many levels, he's missed the mark. Let's go back to Saturday. On Saturday, we had a festival celebrating the United Kingdom, celebrating our diversity in terms of colour and creed. We had speakers from every racial background, speakers from every religious background on the platform, calling for uniting the kingdom, calling for bringing people together. The exact opposite of what Starmer has just done. Starmer has just alienated, I would say, 30 million people by his press conference. Everybody in this country right now is wanting to know exactly why that demented monster carried out that barbaric act of murder. And Starmer could have used that press conference that he's just had to reassure the British people that he's on it, that he's got this under control, that basically he knows why the guy did it and he's about to tell us why he did it. Now, I think it's very interesting. Obviously, the guy's been named. I don't really care what his name is, to be honest with you. We know his parents were Rwandan migrants that came to this country, I believe, in the 90s after the genocide in Rwanda. That's what I believe to be the truth. If I'm wrong in that, just correct me in the comments, but I believe that's the case. So the first point is, if his parents hadn't, this is just factual. This is not racist. This isn't xenophobic. This is just a fact. If his Rwandan mum and dad, that monster, hadn't come to this country, that attack wouldn't have happened yesterday. That's just a fact. I'm not making anything up. If his body, his person wasn't in our country, the attack would not have gone down on Monday. Wouldn't have happened. So that's the first point. And I think that's a very relevant point, because it does hit right to the heart of immigration policy. That if you've got people that come into the country and their offspring do that, yes, of course, a British person could do something similar, but it's very rare. It's very rare. I remember Dunblane. Dunblane was carried out by a white guy. Okay. But it was, what, 35 years ago? 30 years ago? Long time ago. We have had scores of knife attacks in this country. We've had scores of terror attacks. And the problem that we've got is the government and the state continually gaslight us. They hide the facts. The Reading attack, where 3, I think, homosexuals were murdered purely and simply because of their sexuality by an Islamic fanatic who shouted Allah Akbar as he killed them. And when that attack happened, we were told it was to do with mental illness and not to do with terrorism. Now, it's very interesting. The other interesting fact about this monster is the Lancashire Police Counter-Terror Command is still investigating that. Why didn't Keir Starmer mention that? Why did he keep his mouth shut about the possible motive? What he's doing is exactly what every government has done since 7/7, and it's clamp down on the response and not look at the cause of the problem. And what happens is it becomes a cold house, and we've got to use phrases like the preferred demographic. And we all know what people mean when they're using the term the preferred demographic. Another point in case, yesterday on the streets, I watched the footage from London yesterday. And what happened was there was a crowd of lads walked from the demonstration in Downing Street to Parliament Square. They did some silly stuff, letting off flares at Churchill. Not a good idea. I find that annoying and a little offensive. When they came back to Downing Street, instead of the police letting them rejoin their friends at Downing Street, they put a line across the road at the Cenotaph. Now, 2 things happen there. One, it gets the money shot for the media. Far-right thugs fight police at the Cenotaph. Keir Starmer said there was a Nazi salute there. I didn't see it. I've watched as much of the footage as I can get my eyes on. Was there a still of a man's hand in the air? Does that make it a Nazi salute? I don't think so. So even in his reporting of what happened yesterday, he's not reporting accurately. Should the lads that were coming back from Parliament Square have got into a fight with the police? No. But then again, should the police have blocked the road and stopped them getting back to their friends and colleagues? No, they shouldn't. The police should have let them rejoin the rest of the crowd at Downing Street and actually try to police it properly and calm things down. After the scuffle, and it was ugly for a few minutes, there's no doubt about that. We're not going to sit here and tell lies. But was it provoked? Yes, it was provoked. When your way is passed and you're a sizable body of men, that causes a big problem because the people behind you are pushing forward, and by default you get pushed into the police. As you get pushed into police, they draw their batons and hit you. People behind see what's happening. If they got something in their hands, they start throwing stuff. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but that's what happens. Now, again, when I'm in those sort of situations, I have been in those situations, I do my best to de-escalate and put myself between the police and the crowd. And anyone that knows me knows that I've done this for the past 7 years, from the first Football Lads Alliance March, the second Football Lads Alliance March in October 2017, where the police deliberately put them by the side of the road opposite Downing Street, calling us racists and Nazis, calling us Nazi scum, when there was black people on the march with us who veterans, black veterans and black former police officers on the march with us who were called Nazi scum by Stand Up to Racism in 2017. But we, the veterans and the football lads, leaders of the football lads, put ourselves in harm's way and stopped disorder then. We've done it on numerous occasions since then, where we've intervened to stop disorder and put ourselves in harm's way. But of course, Keir Starmer knows nothing about that because he knows nothing about us. He knows nothing about our politics. He knows nothing about what we believe. He is a bigot. He is a bigoted, narrow-minded, technocratic little creep. And he looks like a soulless man to me. We've had some really bad prime ministers, but he will turn out to be the most sinister prime minister we have ever seen. The sooner this party is booted out of power, the better. But of course, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to get this party out of power. What did he say in his press conference? What did he talk about? He talked about banning orders. Who's he going to ban and why? He talked about social media. Well, we've been here before with social media. We've got Ava Brown as the Home Secretary. We all know her track record in banning people from social media. I just hope Elon Musk stands up to these people and does not let them have their way in removing us from social media platforms. Now, thankfully, I'm pretty good at sniffing out a lie. Not always, but I'm pretty good at sniffing out a lie. Whenever the nonsense was put about the name of the man who carried out this attack, when it was a false name and all sorts of false information was coming in, I didn't put it out. I know Tommy's team didn't put it out because we could tell that was just garbage. So who's he talking about? Who's he going to ban off social media? And it was very interesting. There was the press were almost leading him on about this idea of banning the EDL, an organization which hasn't existed for 10 years. And the reality is that's how out of touch Claire Rayner is, that she was talking during the week about banning the EDL. The Merseyside police were talking about the EDL. The EDL does not exist. Simple as that. And in fact, there is no centralized organization controlling this and pulling the strings. That's the whole point. It's called leaderless resistance. There is no leader. There is no single figurehead that is pushing this agenda. Tommy is the tip of the spear, but he says himself he's not the leader of this. He is in leadership, but he says he's not the leader. So the police have got a problem, because who do they go after when there's nobody there for them to go and grab and say, well, you've led this, you've done this, because that's not the way it works. It's different when we organize a festival. When we organize a festival like we had on Saturday, that had 100,000 people at it, we put a lot of planning into it, and of course there's leadership there because we've got to lead that. But when there's a flash demo, that's not about people leading a mob to get involved in violence. People turn up and have a peaceful protest. If they're goaded and attacked by the police, sometimes they respond. But the response last night was very, very muted, considering how many people were there and considering the provocation from the police. Hundreds of people arrested, women, elderly men, journalists, men who were on the way home from work in business suits, arrested by the police, handcuffed and taken away. That policing last night was disgusting. And of course, all those people who got arrested last night, no doubt all of them will have banning orders on and will not be allowed to attend demonstrations. And this is the chilling effect. So what do we do as a movement? And this is the important thing. We've got to make a decision about what we do. Starmer, instead of focusing on the murderer, the killer, the psychopath, the lunatic that killed those 3 little babies, instead of focusing on him and what they're going to do about knife crime, the maniac Starmer, Stasi Starmer, Keir Starling and his Starmer troopers have decided they're going to target the far right. Yes, that's us, the far right, which of course we aren't. We're not far right at all. We're just right. And you see, this isn't a battle between right and left. This is a battle between good and evil. And Starmer is well and truly on the side of evil. He is sinister. The man didn't even know what a woman was until a few weeks ago, and he's the Prime Minister of our country. He supported Jeremy Corbyn in 2019 in the general election. He wanted Jeremy Corbyn, a friend of Hamas, a friend of Jerry Adams and Martin McGuinness. Incidentally, Martin McGuinness was the leader of the Provisional IRA in Northern Ireland, of Northern Command, for many, many years, and had a disgusting amount of blood on his hands, British blood, Irish blood, Protestant and Catholic blood. We mustn't forget that. Keir supported Jeremy in his bid to become Prime Minister and would have served in his cabinet. And what fun that would have been. And I want to say something. If you voted Labour and you're watching my channel, I'm sorry, you're not going to like what I've got to say, but you're an absolute imbecile. If you're a Labour voter, if you voted Labour in the last election, you're an absolute imbecile. And I am now beginning to regret asking people to vote Reform. I'm going to have to say it. Farage was very clear last night. He'll never have anything to do with Tommy Robinson. Never. That's what he said. So we've got a massive problem in the political system. So what we've got to do, guys, this is very important, okay? We, as a movement, and we are a movement, you guys that come on this channel, and I appreciate everyone. There's 3,367 people watching live at the moment on a Wednesday afternoon, but even before most people have got home from work. So I appreciate every single person that's on this channel. But what I want to say is this: what we've got to do is make sure that we build our movement peacefully. We don't give them the slightest iota of a chance to criticize us for being violent or being racist or being xenophobic, because we're not. We're none of those things, and we never have been. We don't give them any chance to do that. And we take a stand for what's right, and we do it in a right way. We do it in a legal way. We do it in a legitimate way, because he wants the slightest chance to ruin everything that we're building. And I still believe, and I mean this, the big prize for us is by 2029 having a movement with 30 million people in it. And I believe, and I keep saying it, I believe hugely that there is a mass number of people in this country who believe what I believe what you believe, and will stand up when the time comes. And the time will come in the next general election in 2029. We have a lot of work to do, because we've got to either get rid of Farage or educate him, because Farage has got to come around to our way of thinking. If he doesn't, he's finished. So, yeah, this is what we're up against, guys. This is what we're up against. Clueless Keir Starmer, Starmer and his Starmer troopers. They're going to try and make our lives miserable. They're going to try and take us off social media. They're going to ban us. That, YouTube's going to be the first one to roll over, without a shadow of a doubt. YouTube will be getting rid of some big players in the next weeks and months. I don't expect to have a YouTube channel. So what I would ask you to do, guys, if you go into the homepage of my YouTube channel, there's a web address. Go onto that web address, sign up, give me your email. It's easy to find. So when you go to YouTube, just go into the homepage, sign up, give me your email address, and we'll keep in touch that way. And I need really everybody that's a subscriber to give me your email address, so I can keep in touch and let you know what's happening within our movement, because I know these guys are going to take us down. I know that. That's just a fact of life. So yeah, what else do I say? I think that was chilling. What he came out with there. I think it was chilling. I think he wasn't reading the room. People don't care. The average person in the street doesn't care about a few people pushing and shoving in Downing Street. What we do care about is the preferred demographic trying to change our culture and religion. What we care about is little children being murdered. And we care about the motives of the man that murdered those children and tried to murder 10 others. We care about the motive of that man, because we want to know why he did it. Nobody's telling us. We've been gaslit by the government. I don't believe for a minute that Merseyside police or whoever it is don't know why that man carried out that attack. And it's very telling, once again, that the Counter-Terror Command are still investigating this crime, or still helping the police to investigate this crime. If terrorism had been completely ruled out, they wouldn't be involved anymore. I believe they know what happened, but they're not telling us because they're terrified of the backlash. And we probably won't find out until the trial, which I think is set for next year. Guys, I'm going to end the stream there because I've got to get this call. But guys, I think we've got to really, really realize what's going on here. And we've got to fight back against this. We've got to fight back, and we've got to take a stand for what's right. So God bless you all. I'll see you all soon.